This is Jordy Comis, one of the co-producers of Barnstorming PA, here with our live show that is on Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, and maybe some other places. I'll have to double check that. So this is our regular Wednesday show, Roundtable. We're thrilled to have returning champion Jenna Henry, and she'll say hi in a sec. And first time, that's one of our jokes, Mark, about returning champions. Of course, there are no prizes, but Mark Steyer, and I'll let you introduce yourself in a minute. Mark, Jenna, do you want to say hi and what you're up to these days?
Yeah, I'm Jenna Henry. I'm the deputy director of Better PA. We most recently worked to end prison gerrymandering in Pennsylvania. We're successful, mostly successful in our efforts there. At least made a dent in it. Didn't end it completely, but so that was absolutely an incredible project to work on and be a part of. Right now, we've kind of shifted our focus to defense of our democracy because it seems just every single day the Republicans are coming up with a new way to try and erode our rights and overturn elections. And so a lot of what we're doing right now is working with partners across the state to kind of offer some pushback to this insane rhetoric coming from the right.
Okay. Thank you. Mark, want to say hi, tell people, knowing our listener base, you may be well known, but go ahead and
Sure.
what you do and anything fun about yourself.
Sure. So I'm the director of the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center and the chair of the We the People campaign. Probably a lot of folks know PPPC and our partner organization Keystone Research Center have been doing policy analysis on state and federal issues for 25 years. In recent years, we've done a lot of new advocacy work, including the We the People campaign, which is a proactive issue advocacy campaign that works on a whole agenda from democracy issues to economic issues to issues of public health and safety. We also have a 99% campaign, which has been really active in helping pass the infrastructure bill and in taking us to the doorstep of passing the Build Back Better plan, which I think we will see passed very soon. Knowing the way things have been going, it's going to be on like December 24th, and I'm going to be working all day and all night to respond to it. Since they've done everything else they've done, the federal level has been on a Friday night, and we've worked all day Saturday. Now, luckily, I'm Jewish, so it's okay if I have to work on Christmas Eve.
Yeah, well, and I guess Hanukkah is one of the only holidays celebrating lighting efficiency. So you can burn the midnight oil really well. Is that, can I make that joke?
That's true.
Are you a native Philadelphian, or you've lived there a long time?
No, I'm from upstate New York, right, Sutherland County, so right across the border from Port Jervis, Milford.
Okay.
So my first memory of Pennsylvania was crossing that border on the way to Philadelphia once and seeing a state store and wondering what the hell that was.
Yeah, they sell states. That's interesting. No, it's great to have you. I know that the We the People campaign, y'all came up with yourself and I think Adrian and maybe somebody else to the church in Northumberland. That was one of the places where you did a listening session. And, I still hold that up as a really great way to, to take the policymaking process and connect it to like the grassroots and people, in between. And it's been from my perspective as a person out in the community. I mean, it's a great core agenda that we haven't passed totally, but it also is adaptable, right? We don't have to keep reinventing like, here's our 2018, here's our 2019. That was that part of the initial thinking behind it.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm glad you remember that. I look back very fondly on that. It was the first of 13 community conversations we did that year when we were starting We the People. Since then, we've done lots of events. I don't think we've been back in person, but we've been back on Zoom because we've done, since March 2020, most of our community conversations have sadly been on Zoom. The agenda, the policy agenda has not changed that much, mainly because the General Assembly is hopeless at this point and will not pass it. It's not for lack of trying. And I'll tell you one thing we've actually made progress on is we've gotten the Democrats pretty united behind it. And one should not take for granted that a Democratic General Assembly will automatically pass a progressive agenda. That was not true a couple of years ago. It's much closer to being true right now. If we get the power, if the voters decide in 2022 to elect a Democratic House, you will see a Democratic House led by the most progressive speaker in Pennsylvania history, composed of progressive activists and legislators who really care about the issues we care about, they're not going to do what happened. I'm not going to be very specific because I don't want some people are still there. But one of the last times one of the houses in Pennsylvania turned Democratic, they passed increased the minimum wage, and then they looked at each other and said, "Now what do we do?" They're not going to have any trouble. I suspect when we get a Democratic House and Senate, the first thing they will do will again pass an increase in the minimum wage. But when they do that, they will have a list of 7 or 8 major policy initiatives from the We the People agenda that they will then move on to, and I'm pretty confident that will happen. So we've had a lot of success, but we haven't crossed that last step of getting the majority that will enable those great initiatives to be enacted.
No, I'm glad you said that, and this may relate to some of the topics, related to the polling that Better Pennsylvania did that Jenna shared with us. But what I was going to say is, I still feel like an awful lot of political commentary kind of comes from this, 80s and 90s perspective that there's moderate Republicans and conservative Democrats, and we're all I think fairly plugged into the polarization on the right. I don't want to say polarization because that sounds bad, but on the left also there's more ideological agreement, not even ideological, policy agreement, I think nationally and in the state, and that's what you're talking about.
I'll give you an example. When I worked really hard to get the Affordable Care Act enacted, our problem was holding together Democrats, and there were about 34 members of the U.S. House who were really iffy. We needed to get 3 of them. We got them in Pennsylvania because we had the best Healthcare for America Now campaign in the country, and we really worked hard. We lost 31 Democrats nationwide. We did not lose. We lost 1 Democrat on Build Back Better.
That's a great point.
Democratic Party in the U.S. Congress, as well as the Democratic Party in the Pennsylvania House and Senate, is far more progressive than they were, far more united. They're not way out to the left, but at this point, they are a progressive party. And people need to understand.
The other thing I wanted to just throw out, I keep being in conversations, especially I feel like the last week, about how people will say Democrats are bad at messaging, and I think sometimes that's a proxy for the left broadly or progressives. There's many funny versions of this, like, a liberal bumper sticker at the bottom says "idea continued" on the next bumper sticker, things like that. But I like to push back that we're not always bad, right? So count every vote in 2020 was a really effective way to say that we need to protect democracy. And I think that 99%, I know it didn't come out of a Democratic message shop, but it's super effective at underscoring, how much economic division separates us, and that the vast majority of Americans have more in common. So I like to hold those up as 2 examples when it's not that our messaging is always bad. Having said that,
I'll tell you why the 99% and the We the People names are so good. No pollsters, no consultants. We went around and talked to people and saw what they responded.
Well, that's good. Well, my memory is the 99 and the 1% kind of grew out of Occupy. That's, I haven't done a deep cultural history.
No, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
We were deliberately responding to a grassroots movement that already existed.
Yep.
Again, it wasn't, that movement wasn't named by taking a poll.
Exactly.
Doing a folk.
Exactly. I saw, this may have already come and gone, but when Biden was in Scranton a week ago or something, there were one or two news pieces that and he was selling the BIF, the bipartisan infrastructure fund, or whatever the F is, that the White House decided to rebrand it. And I'm not kidding you, it was Building America Back Better. And I was like, okay, I cannot believe I had one of those, like with a bad movie, how did this get made? I'm like BIF is not great, but everybody understood what it was. When we've got Build Back Better and you want to rename the other one the Building America Back Better, that is, you're not helping. You're not helping. Well, we're already, as usual, a little behind schedule, but I just wanted to throw out something because I'd be curious what you all have to say. It is the season of gift giving, be it Christmas or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or solstice, or just because you want. Somebody's birthday is around now, I'm sure. So I have a particular interest. I think unnecessary kitchen gadgets sort of crack me up. So I thought if people are willing to share, is there something that you've either seen as something that's kind of a ridiculous or an unnecessary gift, or you've been given one that you could share, and we'll have a laugh, and then we'll dig into the serious stuff. But I have one I can go, but either one of you have an example?
So I have one that I actually gave to my son for his birthday. I made a Google Doc for my shopping list, so that like everybody in the house could add things in it. And
we have one too.
He decided to troll me and put just this random, like the most random stuff he could find on there. It was like a Shrek Buddha, and then there was a pillowcase with some Dr. Phil as an M&M on it. And so I bought it for him for his birthday. Bought both of them for him for his birthday.
That's nice. That's great. Where's the Shrek Buddha?
Oh, he actually loves the Shrek Buddha. He has it sitting on his shelf in his room. I'm not sure what became of the Dr. Phil pillow, Dr. Phil M&M. It was the most terrifying looking thing. It was like, is Dr. Phil as like a green M&M with like arms, and like it was very weird. Very weird. I don't know whatever happened to that, but Shrek Buddha survived.
Kind of hard to
imagine.
You, Mark? Well, you know what? You mentioned all the holidays. You didn't mention Festivus. And today on the House floor, Republicans were saying that the bill they passed to destroy our Constitution, SB 106, was a Christmas tree gift. But what really is a Festivus presence, because that bill is just about an airing of grievances on the part of Donald Trump and Republicans who don't like it when they lose elections and want to make sure that no matter what the people say, they're never going to lose an election again.
Right. Wow, that is, as I said, a pro segue. We're going to get back into that in a second. I think for me, there's a thing I saw. I don't know if it still exists. There used to be this thing called Sky Mall. If you flew, that was this catalog and had some really bizarre, ridiculous things in it. It was like things you could order from this catalog, but while you're flying. Anyway, in it was like a countertop appliance for your kitchen. It looked like a normal toaster where you'd pop things up, but it had special like circular spots where you could put the hot dogs, and then a kind of larger circle, I guess, for a hot dog bun. And there's like a picture of a, sort of idealized, I guess, suburban housewife being like, it's so easy to make hot dogs. And I was thinking, it's not that hard, right? Like, I'm not going to give up valuable counter space retail, but I was just like, maybe again on the theme of how did this get made? Like somebody pitched this, a product engineer or whatever, and somebody figured out how to manufacture it and ship it here. I just always thought that was pretty bizarre. But similarly with the Dr. Phil M&M, like, I mean, it wasn't a handmade thing, right? It was mass produced.
I guess it's a meme. I don't know. Gen Z humor is very strange. And it came out of like a meme from somewhere, and then escalated.
Yeah. That's well. Now I'm gonna have to go track that down. So, Mark especially, but Jenna, I imagine you know a fair bit about this too, and I don't know as much. But SB 106, can you set the table for us about what it is and where we are? Mark?
Sure. The Senate passed a bill a couple months ago to change how we elect the lieutenant governor. Basically, to elect the governor and lieutenant governor on one ticket. So the governor would be able to pick his candidate. The gubernatorial candidate would be able to pick his candidate for lieutenant governor. We elect him on one ticket. We wouldn't have the oddities that we've had of Governor Wolf and Mike Stack, or
Right.
Governor Rendell and Constance. I never remember, is this Constance Baker Noel or Constance Noel Baker? I've never gotten that straight.
It is Noel Baker.
Nope. Yeah, people where we have a governor and lieutenant governor who don't see eye to eye, and in the second case, the lieutenant governor called him like, Edmund G. Robinson once, not Edward G. Rendell. So.
I mean, it's like a fun throwback to the early American Republic, right?
Very, very early, before
like around
we had a constitutional amendment to fix it.
Right.
So that we had this nice amendment. I don't often support Republican constitutional amendments, but I supported that one. Our organization spoke for it.
I was about to say,
then
yesterday,
the Republicans basically cherry-picked all the other amendments that they've been coming up with to screw around with our Constitution, and added 4 real turkeys to this SB 106. 2 of them drastically shift the balance of power between the governor and the General Assembly. And, I can get a little wonky about this because I'm a political scientist, and we love talking about separation of powers and checks and balances, and how the governor has the executive power and the legislature has the General Assembly has the legislative power, and are not supposed to mix them too much, or you mix them a little bit to keep each one in line. Well, we created that system actually in first the federal Constitution. When in 1787 we had a constitutional convention, and that constitutional convention was a reaction in part to the Pennsylvania General Assembly of the early part of that decade doing atrocious things by overriding the power of the governor. Actually, at the time they had a 3-man governorship, 3-man executive office, and the Pennsylvania General Assembly was doing utterly insane stuff. And they decided, well, we can't have that. We got to create a strong executive who has some independence. And that's kind of, they developed this idea of the separation of powers, which they borrowed from a French philosopher named Montesquieu. This 2 of the 5 amendments now do is give the General Assembly so much power that they prevent the governor from exercising the power to issue regulations under laws created by the General Assembly, or proclamations, or exercising executive orders, all of which they will have granted the governor the power to do by passing a law. Now they don't want to just pass a law. They want to say, all right, if we don't like exactly the way you exercise your executive power to pass that law, well, by simple majority vote, we're going to change what you did or stop what you did. That's insane. That's such a violation of American principles. And, very good principles, because in addition to creating an independent executive, you don't want a legislature which tends to be fractious and divided and have shifting majorities sometimes to act in ways that make the whole administrative machinery of the government inconsistent. But that's what they're going to do. And to respond immediately, say there's a pandemic, and say people think that a mask mandate might save the lives of kids, and you got some people who think, oh, we're not going to wear masks, and they get all excited about it. Well, we don't want to have a government that responds to a minority of people that get frantic about something that's crazy. And that's why you have an independent governor. And now we won't have that. And I can go on about this, but let me one last point. They keep saying we are the people closest to people, but the fact is the General Assembly has been elected in gerrymandered districts for 20 years. They are closest to the people they have chosen to be closest to.
Right.
They have never represented a majority of people. The only person elected statewide is the governor of Pennsylvania. The current governor has been elected by a big majority and then an even bigger majority twice. And they want to say they represent the people. Well, that's just nonsense.
Right.
They represent a minority of the people, and they're mostly responding to the right wingers in their own districts who have threatened to primary them if they don't toe the Trump. We're not going to do anything to stop the pandemic line. So so there are those two pieces. Then there's a voter ID piece, which is also terrible, and then there's the order. We're going to allow the Auditor General to audit elections piece, which is not only just a genuflection to the big lie, but if you stop and think about what would have happened if we had a Republican Auditor General in 2020 who was backing up the Republicans who were telling the Congress not to seat Pennsylvania's electors, that makes that situation a lot worse. So it's one disaster piled upon another. It really is. It's a Christmas tree of attacks on our Constitution.
Let's talk about the balance of power thing for a sec, and then dig into the voter ID and the Auditor General. I didn't know that about Pennsylvania's 3-person governorship. I'd heard a little bit. Is that news to you, Jenna? I always thought.
Yeah, I've not heard that before.
Yeah, I heard one historian once talking about how the first version of the Pennsylvania Constitution at that time was so radical in a good way in terms of giving people power that it scared the bejesus out of the people writing the U.S. Constitution. Kind of infill in
Benjamin Franklin for that.
Yeah, in Independence Hall. But I like the messaging there, Mark. We could be like, SB 106, back to the good old days of the Articles of Confederation, because that seems a little bit what you were saying. And in general, I keep thinking about how, at least growing up, it's sort of like we painted this picture collectively that we like have plebiscites, right? We vote, and then the majority winner, for example, with president and other things, and we really don't. We still have these weird systems like the Electoral College and other things that were designed to stop powerful people from feeling threatened by the power of the ballot box, with like electors and all of that. And then we sort of bolted on a more 20th century modern kind of plebiscite machinery, but underneath that is still this, it's like trying to put it's a terrible analogy, a DeLorean chassis on a horse and buggy. It's still kind of at the end of the day, as a horse and buggy is the engine. Does that make sense as a metaphor? And we keep running into these problems, like what they wanted to do, if I understand it, is basically the legislature be able to overwrite the power of local results to install their own electors. That's the gist of it.
I mean, the whole thing's a power grab. This whole entire bill, everything that they're doing, these constitutional amendments, and then putting constitutional amendments on the primary ballot in an odd year when only a fraction of the electorate is actually showing up to vote. It's just all a power grab. I mean, they see the writing on the wall, and that is that the Republican Party, if it survives the millennials, is not going to survive Gen Z. These kids are not having it. Like, they're just not. And they see that writing on the wall, and they know that they cannot hold on to power if they don't just steal it. And so that's exactly what they're doing. They are trying to set it up so that 20 years from now, whenever, my son and his friends are the main voting bloc of the electorate, that they can still try and grip on to some thread of the power that they know they are most assuredly going to lose.
Yeah. I mean, no party that thought that we might elect a Republican governor would diminish the power of the governor the way this party did. They are pretty much assuming they're not going to win statewide races. So their best chance of staying in power is to, use various kinds of chicanery to stay in, to keep hold of the General Assembly and use the General Assembly to eviscerate the power of a governor. And you know, you're not what you're pointing to about the Pennsylvania General Assembly back in that time. The reason that we've had you know responses to immediate circumstances quite often. The reason Pennsylvania had a three-headed executive power is because they were afraid, because they had just revolted against the king and they wanted a
Right.
weak executive. Then they decided, you know, a weak executive and a crazy legislature. And I've actually studied this. The Pennsylvania General Assembly wasn't that crazy, but it did some stuff that didn't really make a hell of a lot of sense.
Mhm.
And then they said, all right, we need some balance. Now, there are a lot of ways to protect against tyranny, and separation of powers, checks and balances is one way. A parliamentary system is another. I'm not sure our system is the best, but it's the best one we're going to get in the United States at the moment, to have some checks and balances. And to totally override them, and to make it impossible for people to elect a governor who stands with them on the agenda he brings to Harrisburg, and make it impossible for him to move that agenda forward is not a way. I mean, it's a way to create a government that's is static and can't move, and you know, will never meet the needs of Pennsylvanians.
So they put these 4 amendments on this bill that was ostensibly about unifying the election process of the governor and lieutenant governor. I mean, I don't know if you all would know, but like, I get the feeling this was a little bit of a surprise or out of the blue. Like there's other election stuff going on in Harrisburg. You know, were you all surprised it was attached to this, or is this a little bit of a kind of a Friday news dump situation? You know, like they wanted it on this bill because it already has support and it's late December and blah, blah, blah. People aren't paying attention.
We knew all these other pieces that were going forward. There was a amendment on voter ID and a bunch of other bad stuff. There was this the 2 amendments were on the separation of powers and checks and balances. And what they did is they took like the worst things they had and dumped it all on this because it's the end of the year. And I guess they feel they need to show the right wing folks that they're you know, listening to Donald Trump and folks like him. And you know, they're scared of their own electorate in part, and that's why some are doing for that. There are 2 sorts of Republicans in Harrisburg now. They're the right wing true believers and the people who are just scared. I mean, I've met Kerry Benninghoff. I mean, he's not the worst guy in the world. His politics was never. He spoke at our budget summit like 4 or 5 years ago, but he's just scared. You know, he wants to hold on to a seat. I mean, you got people who, you know, Hannah Arendt's idea of, you know, the banality of evil.
Yes.
Adolf Eichmann was not a true believer in Nazi. He was a careerist.
Yeah.
She was actually wrong about Adolf Eichmann, it turns out. But the basic concept was right. Most of these people are just careerists and opportunists, and the right wing holds the balance of power, and they don't want to lose in a primary. And they're just gutless, and they're willing to take our democracy down so that they don't have to lose a seat in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. If we survive to write the history books,
right?
These people are gonna, you know, profiles and cowardice. Well, Kerry Benninghoff and Jay Corman will you know, each have a chapter in that book.
I hope I get to write it.
You also used
of Center County. I have a lot to say.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Well, I was going to say, Fred Keller, who is now my congressional rep, and he was my state rep, and I didn't ever know him very well, but he went from being like a nice guy Republican. You know, he would come to League of Women Voters events. When the gerrymandering lawsuit came, suddenly he started, describing them as a partisan organization. And, you know, I was like, okay. And since he went to Washington, he's far more, Freedom Caucus ideological. And the thing is, somebody like him and his replacement, David Rowe, on some of these things like democracy, I'm like, you're a safe seat, you know, like you'd have to be caught in bed with 3 dead goats and a live chicken to get voted out of office. And for some of these people, that may be appealing to them.
Yeah,
but
I don't think they'll do it.
yeah, but you know, so
they're only worried about Republican primaries.
Right.
I'm just finishing up an op-ed this evening for a Bucks County paper. There are 5 Republicans in Bucks County who constantly say they're moderates. You know, they're centrists. They're against the extremes in both parties. Every single one of them voted for this thing. You can't claim to be moderate and vote for SB 106.
It's like what I said to one of my children once when they announced that they were bisexual but brought home a string of opposite sex, girlfriends. I said, you can say you're a deer hunter, you got to bring a deer home every now and then. So, you can say you're a moderate, but if you're not bringing home any moderate bacon, don't mean much. Jenna, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but I feel like looking through the polling slides, it really relates to the threats here that Mark's talking about. Do you want to pull some of that out? I saw some connections, but
one thing to remember about this poll is it was done a month and a half ago now at this point.
I don't think that's a problem. Do you? I really don't.
I just think that there's a lot has happened since then. It could affect, it's showing Joe Biden's favorability at 44%, Tom Wolf at 43%. I think both of those numbers could have potentially changed. I think, with the Build Back Better was passed, gas prices are starting to go back down, even though we know that doesn't really have anything to do with Joe Biden. People think it does. So I think it's just a kind of like a good asterisk to be like, maybe things shift, right? So this is just kind of a snapshot. I think what relates to this, what was most interesting.
Are you impressed with my tech skills that I've got it embedded as a share screen here?
Yeah.
So if there's one you want to look at, let me know and I can try and go.
Yeah, I'm trying to find which one it was. If you look at slide number 7.
What does it say?
Oh, you know what? This version.
I was actually thinking a little bit, even this one here. I feel like it's related to deeper level. This question about whether people are concerned about basically democracy or the big lie. I mean, you didn't put it here, but the slide says asking people what they're more concerned about. State legislators will put up deliberate barriers to voting that will infringe on the freedom to vote versus I'm more concerned that state legislators will create policies that will result in illegal voting and other forms of voter fraud. That's in the language of people who think that's an issue. Those amendments, like the one about voter ID and the other one, right, Mark, are in line broadly with that, that big lie. And so, what we see is, not that it's very surprising, but Democrats and Republicans see very differently. I guess this is slide 9. And the independents, are split the way we would want to see, but 53-45. Here's the thing. I don't know if I can square this circle, but this is what I think about a lot. Is that a lot of our playbook about getting things to change in Harrisburg, and you all know this way better than I do, is building a coalition that includes some independents in terms of citizens or moderates, and ideally, Mark, in the past, right, some of those moderate Republicans, or Jenna, I think you said some Republicans helped with the gerrymandering progress you made on prison gerrymandering. I'm sorry. But there's a larger conversation, it seems to me, in politics now that talks about sort of intensification of differences, right? That there's more polarization, and you see this here, and everybody knows the rough numbers that something like 70% of Republicans think that the 2020 election outcome was illegitimate. How do we use the tactics of trying to appeal to a middle or to persuadables to build enough political support to push back on the Republican efforts to undermine democracy when there's more and more polarization? Does that make sense? To me, that feels like a tension, and maybe it's not, but that's the problem I feel like is hard to solve.
I think that the reason that there's so much polarization is because everybody's hiding behind a screen. And when you're behind a screen, you can say things to people that you would not say to them if you were having a conversation face to face. Also, tone isn't always correctly construed. I've had it happen to me where I say something and somebody thought I was being snarky and I really wasn't. It was just, completely misread the tone. And I think that what we really need to do is just get out and talk to people. Like, it's not, I don't think that it's, we need to reinvent the wheel, or, there's no like, there's no like polling we can do that's going to give us the exact right answer. We just need to get out and have conversations with people, because whenever we have those face-to-face conversations, that's when we can, that's when we can really relate to each other. Like I had a situation before, I had to have my car towed, and I actually rode with the tow truck driver. This guy is, total Trump supporter. We talked about everything, except Trump, basically. And really, when it came down to, I'm talking to him about local issues. He was a volunteer firefighter. When I talked about, the police, it's like we agreed on a lot whenever we talked about the actual issues. The second, Trump comes up, then that's a completely different story. But I think that people just aren't having those conversations anymore. Or maybe not anymore, but like we're having less and less of them, and especially with COVID. So yeah, I'm a big advocate for knock every door.
Let me just push back a little bit. Let's say, yeah, right. Like Americans live more kind of fragmented lives. They live in more self-contained, like sort of value spaces. Their churches are more similar. There's good sociological research that people used to not marry across religious lines, but would marry across political differences, right? So two Catholics would marry two Protestants, and they might differ, and it's the opposite, right? And for my own children who are young adults, if they came home with somebody who was radically, who was a Trumpist, that would be a lot more alarming to me than, if they were dating somebody of a different religion. So to have more of those conversations in a context where Americans do live more fragmented lives and more digitally mediated sort of social interactions, it doesn't scale well, right? Like how do we have 10,000 Jennas and Jordys all across these parts of Pennsylvania having all these conversations? Like that's so labor intensive.
Well, I think it's going to require a lot of organizing. It's going to require a lot of training.
This is why we cornered Mark on the call to see what.
Yeah, I think training. I know Nick and I have talked about, starting some kind of like organizer school almost, so that we can actually train people on how to do this work, because that is a big part of the problem, is that we just don't have enough manpower. There aren't enough people to do the work. It's and it's hard to find campaign staff that knows what they're doing, because campaign staff doesn't people don't tend to stick with it, because it's really grueling work and we have to work long hours to do it because there aren't enough of us. So we need to be bringing in as many people as we can and training them, and building it. It's not something that's going to happen overnight, but it's absolutely something that is doable and can be done. And I think we're really making a lot of progress towards making happen right now. I think that the left, in a lot of ways, is probably more united than they have been in a while.
Yeah. So here's an idea. I mean, Mark, I hope you don't feel like I'm betraying any confidence. When we were talking earlier on the phone, you mentioned like tomorrow everybody should be at their representative's office saying this is an outrage, and I totally agree with you. Like these are ridiculous things to do, but and this is purely anecdotal. I don't feel that energy around me. I've been in part of different social movement moments in my life. We all have, whether it's the first war in Iraq, the second war in Iraq, obviously Trump's election, the uprising, the George Floyd Matters, Black Lives Matter uprising. So in kind of my social spaces, I don't feel that energy. I do feel people worried, right? And people will say to me, "Hey, did you see this thing in the Atlantic?" Which I did actually go and look at. And it basically was saying like January 6th was practice. And I was a little bit like, yeah, like that's not news to me. And I assume it's not news to either one of you. Um, um, so what I'm trying to get to is like, what can we do about that? Or let me put it this way, like, why aren't people at that moment? Because, those moments of spontaneous political engagement, from my perspective, are usually because people are aligned to the need, and they're paying attention, and they're willing to kind of step forward and step into those kind of spontaneous moments of leadership or grassroots leadership that tends to produce organizations like some of the ones we're a part of. So that was kind of two questions. So like the first one is like, why aren't people more like motivated? Like maybe let's start there, or and I realize I may be way wrong, but I'm just kind of going from my sense.
So I actually think we do have a bit of a problem. I love what Joe Biden's doing and focusing on economic issues and things, economic recovery. But the more I think about it, the more I realize is that, all politics is really identity politics. All politics is really about, who we are as individuals, how we fit in the collective, who is our group. In the 1950s, there was the first polling research came out, and political science were shocked to discover that when you ask people why they're Democrats or why they're Republicans, they didn't talk about ideas. They talked about what groups they identified with. We think we don't do that as much, but if you ask people why they support Medicare for all or free college tuition, though they sound like ideological reasons, they're really a way of saying, I stand with a group of people on the progressive left, and these are my people. We've got to be expanding that sense of who our people are and make people understand that just as the right is talking about America is being threatened, by which they mean white supremacist America is being threatened by demographic change, by Black people and women advancing, and by a government that's actually concerned about them, we've got to identify who our people are. And I think we have to appeal to people on basis of ideals that are in fact threatened. That includes idea of an inclusive economy in which everyone has an opportunity and everyone can contribute, and in which we're stronger because everyone can contribute. That includes the idea of, as that just says, inclusive, bringing Black people and women and giving them opportunities and protecting the democracy that lets us work together to attain an ideal society. I don't think we can motivate people by appealing to their pocketbooks, and I don't think they ever were motivated that way. The labor movement was not built on just getting people higher wages. They were built on creating a sense of solidarity among working people and a sense of agency and a sense that they can accomplish something. The progressive movement, the populist movements were about building agency and creating a vision of the kind of country we want to create. I think that's what we need to do. And if we do that right, we saw both. In any political moment, there are two problems. How do you motivate the base, and how do you appeal to the people in the center? And I think we appeal to the people in the center and motivate our base by talking about ideals. And I would really recommend not creating an ideal identity based on whether you support Medicare for all or free college tuition. It really should be based on, do you want to create an inclusive democratic community in which everyone has a place, in which everyone has a sense of basic economic security so that they can move on and contribute to the country politically, economically, socially, culturally, artistically. So that's where I think we need to go.
I mean, I don't want to break my arm patting myself on the back, but like when people ask me with the Hub for Progress, which is sort of, it was funny, Jenna. I mean, what's barnstorming? What's the Hub? The lines are a little blurry sometimes. But she asked me earlier, are you doing the podcast for the Hub? And I was like, well, the Hub doesn't quite do podcasts. But anyway, people are like, well, what's progressive? And, I was always like, let's build the biggest possible tent. Right. And for me, trying to make it simple, I was like, do you believe in an economy that works for everyone, in a society that welcomes anyone, and an earth that's here today and tomorrow for everyone? Like, if you're on board with that, then that's good enough, right? And we can talk about differences in implementation or other things. I do think, Mark, and this is, by the way, you said it earlier, you said something about wonking out. This is the place to wonk out, because this is great. I don't know if you know Theta Scotchpole stuff about.
He was one of my teachers.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not that close to her, but I do think that what you're saying about people joining through groups fits with something I was trying to articulate before, which is we're like weirdly very social in this day and age, right? Especially through social media platforms, but we're less, obviously we're in fewer groups. And there's also been a professionalization of some of the things that in the past were part of the populist and progressive movement. And that's just a reality. So those conversations, Jenna, to try and tie all this together, those conversations that used to happen maybe more, we might see sort of naturally or organically, or as a part of the daily institutions that people lived in, those things have atrophied, right? So we're building a whole set of political expectations about campaigns and engaging people, sometimes with models about how much people are engaged in those kinds of organizations. So it's a twofold problem, right? In the Hub for Progress, we talk about this sometimes, like we need to build a durable rural progressive infrastructure, but we also have to build underneath like the kinds of sense of community and organization that people long for. And to make it worse, on top of that, and I don't want to throw too much shade, but some people who are involved in professional political campaigns come along, and that's not their agenda. They're trying to get to 51% however they can, and so their tactics or plans don't always also feed into that. So it's like, if we can cram more messages in the pipeline out into mass media or social media and convince this set of people, then that's good, right? And whether or not it leads to durable civic infrastructure, which is a horrible phrase, it's not in their job description. That's how I see it. I wanted to throw out one thing that's been on my mind. Well, let me put it this way. I feel like responding to this threat, I feel like the Democratic Party is not the best vehicle always, right? Like, of course, the Democrats should oppose what they're doing, but if we're trying to build a broader coalition of people, then it's always easy for people to say, well, you're just saying this because you're a Democrat, right? Like you have questions about voter ID just because you're a Democrat. And I also, I'm going to contradict myself. I think the old model in the League of Women Voters, of which I'm a member and I'm happy to be a member, where they are sort of zealously nonpartisan, also doesn't quite work, right? Because it's easy for them to get painted as partisan. So I've wondered if at especially in rural areas, but maybe in Philly too. I'm not including Philly because it's such a big, complicated political space. I don't presume to understand it. We need something like the Minutemen. I'm sorry, it's like a gendered term, but like we need sort of rapid response people, right, who can respond to some of these problems, and name names and name villains, but also not be an organ of any particular political party, right? So like where I am, it might include, I know a few Republicans who are still consider themselves Republicans, but are horrified by Trump, like a handful. So some of those folks, some civic association people that are still around, right? Like the Kiwanis or the American Legion or whatever, people with that, and faith people. And I was also today thinking like military veterans, right? Who can say with huge amounts of legitimacy, I fought to protect this system. And they can tackle things like in my county, right? A lot of local election officials left because of the pandemic and they weren't replaced. So our county elections office is going to be looking for people. The right wing is going to try and insert Trumpists. They could, do kind of voter outreach or sort of voter protection stuff that's about like a messaging of, like, I worry that defend democracy or stop the coup, because I've said that, I worry that may work against us, right? Because it's too easy to dismiss as overblown. I think it is a problem, but like around more of the let's make sure every vote counts, like things like that. And maybe the third part is also like, this is hard to do. I think we need to not pay too much attention to the 40% who think 2020 was illegitimate. I don't know what to do about them, right? Like trying to spend a lot of time and effort convincing them that their core identity is wrong seems like
There's no rational argument. You can't make a rational argument to an irrational person.
Well, it's
Like,
what Mark said. You're asking them to abandon their tribe. It's hard for anybody to do.
there's no, those people are done. I don't think we should waste too much time trying to convince the people who are already convinced that it was rigged. We need to find the people who don't believe that, the people who have maybe been disenfranchised and haven't been voting. I mean, I think there's a lot more people out there who agree with us than agree with them. We just need to find those people and make sure that they're getting out to vote.
Look, 70% of Republicans believe the election was a fraudulent in 2020. They're part of a tribe that we have no entree into. But 30% of Republicans don't believe that. Those are people who maybe they share some conservative ideas, they share some connections to that tribe, but at the very least, they can feel the weight of other ideals. And I think they can be moved by the ideals I was talking about before, the ideals of an inclusive democracy and an inclusive economy, and protecting both of them and elevating them. And those are the people we need to talk to. And I think we can talk to them at the same time we're mobilizing our base. But the thing is, we've got to reach them, and we can't reach them by just talking to ourselves. So that's why, I'm an old door knocker, and we've got to get back to the doors. We've got to get back to house parties where we ask people, we go to a house party, talk to 20 or 30 people and say, okay, each of you've got to hold one of these, and you don't just have to invite people who think like yourselves. Invite people who you're not sure about, friends of yours whose politics you worry about. Let us come talk to them. Let them meet a progressive, and see. We don't have horns. We don't carry around Miles' little red book, or we're talking about the things that they in fact believe in. Let them hear us do that.
I know a few progressives who carry around Mal's little red book, and it drives me nuts because I keep trying to tell them I don't know what you expect to find there that's useful. But yeah,
that's what you do when you're a sophomore in college and you're trying to identify yourself differently than your parents.
Yeah.
If you're 25 and you're still carrying around Miles' little red book, you're not doing politics. I don't know what you're doing, but it's not politics.
I think you're doing another form of identity creation, like we talked about earlier. But we're close to out of time. Jenna, did you want to say anything more about I don't think we really did justice to your polling that a better Pennsylvania did.
I can just real quick go through like the things that I found most useful with this polling. We knew Joe Biden and Tom Wolf were unpopular, but I think to me, the biggest thing, the standout thing was slide 19. Effective messaging against legislators. And we see that healthcare is the number one issue for, Democrats and people of color. COVID relief, the legislators sitting on $7 billion and not spending it, that was really an effective message with swing voters and independent voters and white voters. So, that's a good message to use to get those people in the middle. Like they're, they have $7 billion that they could have used to help working families and small businesses, and they're sitting on it while everybody struggles. And so, that was an effective message to bring over some of those swing voters. So I think that's really important. The overall, this whole scam review that they're doing is mostly unpopular. It's popular, it's popular with Republicans, and that's really it. One thing that we did do with the message, that we did some message testing there, and so we found out that talking about the audit is good. You shouldn't call it an audit. though. That is some used to scam review, like because people think of audits as like good things. So we've been should not try not to use the word audit. But so when talking about the audit, it's best to say, they are exposing your private information and making it, facing it head on, looking at, talking about, exactly what they're doing, and, this is why it's bad, and they are exposing your personal information, is an effective message to move people away from supporting it. But tying it together with the $7 billion COVID relief fund and saying like, oh, well, they're wasting time and not, and this is what they should be doing, wasn't as effective. People responded better whenever you faced it head on, said exactly what they were doing. So we should absolutely be talking about both of these things, but not together. They need to be two separate issues. We shouldn't be saying, oh, well, they should be spending the $7 billion instead of, but we absolutely should be hitting them for not spending it as a campaign issue. So it's like, which was something that our organization had been doing all along, was pointing out they're wasting time. So we actually found out that we'd been using the wrong message. So that was interesting. That was a very interesting find and made us very glad that we did this. I don't know if you had any other questions about it.
Well, one is, I think, even listening to you and I'm saying, trying to hold up a mirror in a constructive way, like it's hard to talk about this and not use audit. And I've also kind of heard the advice, don't use it. And in my head, I was kind of like, what are phrases that people understand that are more negative? Like, Monday morning quarterback, there's sort of no one should be a Monday morning quarterback. So, I realize that's maybe a little bit further away, but that's kind of what they're doing. Or, rewriting history. They're trying to rewrite history. Like, I have not heard anybody lean into this, and I might be wrong, but I just feel like saying like, hey, you know what? It's 2022. 2020 is over. Let's not rewrite history. Right. And that may be a little bit more effective. I mean, the other thing, this may open up a little bit of a can of worms. When I think about the enormity of the issues that we're facing with some of the SB 106, and then I look at here specifically in the privacy issue, that's not a rally around democracy and freedom kind of message, right? So I was kind of aware that what maybe is effective for galvanizing support for stopping now here I am trying to say audit, not say audit, with the scam review, right? My gut reaction was that's not as strong of a let's protect freedom and democracy in the American way as let's protect your privacy. So I was a little bit
if you look at Democrats, if you look at the Democratic line, it really doesn't matter what we say to our base.
Right.
Our base either message was fine and had pretty good staying power. It's really with the independents, when we're looking at peeling off any of those independents or moderate Republicans, that's when that privacy angle works. And so I'm not surprised that it doesn't hit for you, because you are not you are not the target for that message, right?
Right. No, totally. Well, if you guys will bear with for a sec, I've got a quick sort of hopefully gallows humor little game that I cooked up. It's only about 5 questions. Are you good for this, Mark?
Sure.
Okay, so here's how it works. And I didn't want to assume that you've listened to all 152 episodes of Barnstorming, but this is kind of sort of our usual modus operandi is to try and have a little bit of levity. So I was thinking about coups and dictators and authoritarians. So and this may be too easy, but I've got here several examples of things that authoritarian political leaders, kind of wacky, crazy things that they've done. I tried to kind of soften some of the details so it wasn't too obvious. And so your goal is to guess whether it was former, in air quotes, President Trump, some other authoritarian leader, or complete bullshit, right? So your choices are former President Trump, some other authoritarian leader, or complete bullshit. Any questions? Okay, here's the first one. This political leader directed military air traffic to refuel near his own properties so as to have the flight crews stay overnight and enrich himself.
It certainly sounds Trump.
Jenna, Trump, some other authoritarian figure, or bullshit?
I don't know. It could be any of those.
That's true. It could be any of them.
I'm going to say other authoritarian leader.
Other authoritarian. Mark, you said Trump?
Yeah, I mean, probably be a guy who owns a hotel somewhere.
Yeah. So, well, listen, I didn't do a lot of research. I'm guessing that some of these others, Bolsonaro maybe has some property. I don't know. Or the guy in the Philippines. It was Trump. He had they were stopping in Scotland to refuel and going out of their way to stay near his Scotland golf resort. Okay, this political leader authoritarian imprisoned a film director for 2 years until he agreed to make better movies that this political leader preferred.
Not Trump.
Mark, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'd say it's definitely not Trump. Someone could have done it. I can't remember who though. I'm saying I think that's made up.
Yeah.
Okay, that's made up. Jenna,
I'm leaning towards bullshit myself on that
No,
one.
it was the Kim. Can't remember which one. Kim Il-jung, the one.
Oh, North
not the
Korea.
current one before. Yeah, he imprisoned a film director for 3 years in the late 70s. Kim Jong-un, until he agreed to make movies that he liked better. It was a South Korean, which obviously it was horrible for that person, but it is bonkers. Okay, this political leader had all of the species, right? So a country has their bird, their mammal, all of those species he had renamed. He had tried to have renamed in the Linnaean species system, so it had variations of his name or members of his family, right? So if it were me, and it were Pennsylvania, instead of whatever white deer is, right, which is our state mammal, it would be like, Darius comius or whatever. Does that make sense? So Trump, some other authoritarian leader, bullshit.
Wait, it was a state animal?
No. I used a state as an example.
Oh, okay.
So the bald eagle is our bird.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay. Gotcha.
Stalin once decided, that he would make Lamarckianism the official theory of evolution in the Soviet Union instead of Darwinism.
No, didn't know that.
I don't remember him fooling around with the classification system, though. So
I like the deep cut to Stalin, though. So what are you going to say, Mark? Bullshit?
I think this is made up, too. Yeah.
Okay. Jenna?
Last
time you went with Mark and it wasn't right, so
yeah, that's true, but that doesn't mean anything. That's just you making something up.
I'm known to make some weird things up.
I don't know, because I could totally see somebody doing any of this stuff. I don't know. I'll say other authoritarian leader.
I made that one up. Although now that she's thinking about Stalin, I thought she was busting me. I mean, Stalin may have done that. I didn't check to see that nobody had. I was just trying to think. All right. This political leader stiffed a group of young children who were singers, who were decked out in the colors of their country, stiffed them for performing, and refused to pay for so long that they eventually started doing songs and performances for the opposition.
I'm sure that was Donald Trump.
That sounds very Trumpian, yeah.
Yeah, it was Trump. And there were these three girls did this, not very good, freedom over there. Anyway, I saw on a YouTube thing that they're now doing songs for Democrats because they're so mad that he never paid them.
I actually used to work with a guy who was from Florida and was at one point a chef at Mar-a-Lago and had a similar situation. Like he was like, yeah, Donald Trump still owes me money. He like never got his final pay.
For somebody who probably literally killed some of his own voters with COVID, or let them freeze on that tarmac in, I think, North Dakota, and also there's so many unpaid bills. It's amazing that he gets as many votes as he did. Okay, there's just two more. This political leader had all the days of the week renamed for himself and members of his family. Or tried to, I should say.
Didn't Caesar rename the month, one of the months, after himself?
August?
Julius?
I don't know.
July?
Julie? Oh, July.
July, yeah.
I don't know
Okay.
I don't know if he messed with the days.
I will say I didn't go that far back in history. I sort of, roughly the late modern period from the 17th century on.
I'm gonna go with other
authoritarian. Mark?
I can see another authoritarian doing that.
It's the president of Kazakhstan, whose name I'm going to butcher, Sakharov or something, had all of the days of the week in his country renamed. Okay, last one. Led his country to believe that, led at least 40% of his country to believe that an internationally recognized election was completely fraudulent up to 2 years after it took place. That's the easy one.
I wonder who this one's so hard.
We're dealing with him today.
We're dealing with him tonight.
And he's probably going to run again in 2024.
I love the idea that they want him to be Speaker of the House. I mean, I love in a way that like he could get away with not really doing the job of president because he's lazy as hell. I don't think he understands how for somebody who doesn't want to deal with people. And
is he going to run for Congress?
You don't have to be.
Oh, you don't have to be a member of Congress to be Speaker of the House.
I don't know if we've ever had somebody who wasn't. Yeah, the caucus in charge. Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
Wow, I feel like that's very strange.
Yes. Thank you both for coming on and for being in relatively good cheer given the seriousness of the topics. I'll put links to Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center, We the People 99%. If you're listening to this and you've never read Mark's writing, which is many places, including even on Facebook, he's a wonderful writer, and I'm not just saying that about all kinds of topics. Jenna's at Better Pennsylvania. I keep mangling. Better Pennsylvania.
Better PA.
Better PA. And you're also on Twitter with some frequency. I thought the Better PA tweets were great. I really like the Christmas tree one.
We've been trying to do more live tweeting because I think it's a little easier for people to digest. Not everybody's a nerd like me and will sit and just watch chess session for fun. So we wanted to kind of give it to people in a way that they can consume easier and still gets the point across. So we've been trying to do a lot of that.
Awesome. Any last comments, words?
It's been a long day. I don't have anything else to say.
Yeah. Well, I learned some good things.
Drops tomorrow at 1 p.m. How could we not? I would absolutely be remiss if I did not mention the map that I have been patiently waiting for not so patiently waiting for. But we're hearing a lot of rumors and it's going to be interesting. If you follow Stephen Caruso on Twitter, he had a very interesting thread about a number of the Republicans have seen the maps, but the Democrats have not, I guess. But some of the Republicans were saying that there was no attention paid to incumbent protection, and there were quite a few incumbents drawn into districts together. The word is that House Republicans are not so happy. I guess the Senate Republicans are a little more happy than the House Republicans, but I don't know. It's all speculation and rumor. So tomorrow's going to be interesting.
Definitely. So thank you all again. And I'll go ahead and end the stream.